Hey, how's everybody doing? Last in line leadership faithful. We're bringing you another great episode today. This series, the Get Out of Your Way series for October. And I hope you've enjoyed what we've done to this point. We're covering some real issues for real life and some real folks sharing some experiences, sharing their perspectives and insight. And we've got a great one today. We've got a guy who has started a platform, a podcast for blended families. His name is Joel Hawbaker, and he resides in the great state of Alabama, and love technology, allowing us to connect with great people beyond just our four walls in our backyard. So Joel, his 10 commandments for blended families is going to be the podcast called TCBF, 10 CBF, correct?
Yeah.
And so blended families is his passion. It's his experiences. It's what he knows and what he has a heart for, sort of helping folks navigate through those waters. Something he created a few years back, and he is writing a book with that same title. He is married for how long now?
6.5 years.
6.5, and he has 2 daughters, correct?
Yeah.
Teenage daughters, I think. Did you say?
Yes, correct. From my first marriage. Yeah.
That's correct. That's awesome. Okay. So without any further, I want to just remind folks, like this platform obviously is to talk about leadership, but we also talk about other things that are factors within ourselves that can build us as better leaders, not just cookie cutter leadership, corporate leadership, family leadership. It's all of the above, but it really starts within who we really see ourselves as and who we're called to be to help others advance in that walk as well. Faith-based platform, which I love unapologetically shouted out from the rooftops, because I believe God's called each one of us to be leaders because we each have influence. So I'm going to let Joel go in a little bit about his story.
Yeah. So John, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be chatting with you this morning. And as you mentioned, a lot of my story involves blended families. I have been in one since I was about 12 when my parents split up. I was in middle school. And about a year later, my mom started dating my stepdad. And so I knew what it was like to go through a divorce as a kid and see what it could be. And then I got married for the first time when I was 19. It was after my sophomore year of college. And that lady and I were married for 8.5 years, had 2 kids together. And then we divorced about a decade ago. And then she has remarried since then. I remarried about 6.5 years ago. And she has a son from her second marriage. I don't have any more kids. We have 2 giant dogs. And so my daughters are teenagers now. They're 16 and 13. And so I've seen what blended family life is like as a younger person, and I've also seen what it's like as an adult to go through a divorce with 2 kids. And what I realized when I went through my divorce is just how blessed I was by my parents and my stepdad, because the example they set was different than what you see in 99% of divorce situations. They were kind to each other. They were respectful of each other. I never heard any of them say a bad word about any of the rest of them. My dad and my stepdad actually became pretty good friends. I can remember having Thanksgivings together with mom and dad and stepdad's dad all together around the Thanksgiving table.
Wow.
And, you know, this shouldn't matter, but in Alabama it does. My stepdad is an African-American guy. And so it wasn't just blended family in the sense of divorce and remarriage. It was also blended in sense of race, which is how that term is also used sometimes. And so, again, I was really thankful to have that example, but I didn't know how good of an example it was until I got to college and started talking with friends. And I'd say, yeah, so I'm going home for Thanksgiving and here's who's going to be there. And they'd go, I'm sorry, what? Your dad and your stepdad are both going to be there? I'm like, yeah, is that not normal? Don't most families still get together on holidays? And they're looking at me like I've grown an extra head over here or something.
Yeah.
You know? And so that was really powerful for me. And about, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I've been a school teacher for most of my adult life. When I went through my divorce, I got out of teaching for a couple of years, did a whole bunch of other things, tried other jobs, hated all of them, went back to teaching because I love it. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I really felt the desire to reach out and like you're doing is work with leadership, right? I wanted to teach kids better leadership. I wanted to teach adults better leadership. And so I wrote an ebook based on my dad's life called 10 Things Dad Taught Me Without Saying Anything. Because my dad was, he was my hero. He was a retired Army lieutenant colonel. He was an airborne ranger. He was in the 82nd Airborne, Vietnam veteran, won 3 Bronze Stars. Like he did the Army thing well. And that was never my calling, but I learned a lot from him based on a lot of those experiences. And so I wrote that ebook and I started doing some speaking. And then I wrote another book called Inverted Leadership, Lead Others Better by Forgetting About Yourself. And it's all about gospel-centered servant leadership, right? It's all about how we define, like we were talking about before we started recording, how we define success shapes how we pursue success, right? And so what you think success looks like shapes what you do. And so that was really a lot of fun. And I've had a blast doing that. I was able to speak at high schools and colleges and churches and conferences and had a great time. But I felt this nagging call that what God really wanted from me specifically was to focus on blended families, because the world needs better leadership. And so I'm glad that people are doing what you are still doing. But I also realized, like, I was hitting dead end after dead end. I wasn't able to speak in as many places as I wanted to. And I wasn't able to get into a lot of the conferences I wanted to. And I really feel like it was because God was going, that's not where I want you. You have a relatively unique calling in terms of blended families. That's where I need you to go.
That's where it begins and ends right there, isn't it?
Yeah. And so that's what I've been doing for about the last 2 or 3 years, is really changing my focus to blended families. So what I did is I took those leadership principles of forget about yourself, put others first, and applied them to blended families specifically. And said, okay, so what does it look like to put others' needs in front of your own in a blended family? Oh, crap. That means you've still got to be good to your ex. Oh, crap. That means you've still got to speak kindly of your other, either like your former in-laws. That means, you know what I mean?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And that's, anybody who's been through a divorce, that's not fun. Or just remember back to when you were a teenager and somebody dumped you, or you broke up with someone. Do you really want to go out of your way to be nice to them the next day in junior high or high school?
Quite the opposite sometimes.
That's exactly it. And it doesn't matter if they dumped you or you dumped them. Like, you don't want to be nice to them anymore. You're not together.
Yeah.
Well, tough luck, buddy. Like, that's what God calls us to.
Yeah. No, that's a picture of just who Jesus was. And that's what we're called to do, is to get as close to that as possible. And I think that's a great platform. And you kind of took the words out of my mouth when you're talking about the book that you wrote at Inverted Leadership. That's, the book I wrote, Last in Line Leadership. Same exact principle, from Matthew about being last to be first and first will be last. I think leadership and our qualities to be good leaders applies in every area of life, whether it's blended families, whether it's ivory tower, whether it's in the classroom. My dad's also a captain in the Marine Corps in Vietnam,
Nice.
Silver Star, and cancer got the better of him a few years back, but
Same.
he fought that battle for a long time, and he was my hero too. And I take a lot of the things I learned from him, and I think he would say, look, take some of the things I didn't do right and learn from those too. And I think that's what our transparency together, you and I and others in this platform space can offer is, what, we didn't do it all right all the time.
Right. No, nobody does.
Learn from this and be, here's the answers to the test. You're going to walk this same path. And that's what I tell my kids all the time. So trying to set that foundation and set that example more than just talk about it. And I think you're doing awesome. So to dive into this, we call this Get Out of Your Way for this particular series. And I call it the ABCs of Get Out of Your Way. And we're going to go into approach. We're going to go into some of the barriers, and we're going to go into some of the clutter that's involved in preventing ourselves from really realizing our potential, walking in some of those opportunities, stepping out in faith beyond our fears, trying not to be hindered by the hypotheticals that are out there.
Right.
So we're going to get your perspective. The first one obviously is approach. It's all about perspective. It's all about our attitude. Our attitude and effort we talk about all the time on this platform, and I'm never going to stop talking about it. Those are the two things we control.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Our attitude and our effort. No one can take that away from us. No one can force us with those two things. Those are our choice. So how do you, going through some of the journey you've been through, I mean, you've obviously had some challenge. It hadn't been smooth sailing probably every minute of every day within a blended environment. controlling the internal and deflecting the external is what I like to
Mm-hmm.
talk about. So, because there's a lot of those distractions, a lot of social media, a lot of those things. Talk to me about attitude and effort and kind of how you mitigate some of the external.
One of the big things that I talk about when I speak about blended family life is absolutely what you just described. It's your attitude, because your mindset has to be right or everything else goes wrong. After my divorce, I went through bankruptcy and foreclosure, and I didn't really have the opportunity to see my kids as much as I might have liked. Not because my
Mm-hmm.
ex-wife did anything wrong, but just that's how things fell out. And so it would have been very easy to play the victim. And for a little while I did. I was mad at her, and I was mad at life, and I was mad at God. You know, I missed my dad because he had passed away a couple years ago, and that, you know, contributed to a lot of anger issues that I had that also didn't do my marriage any favors, that contributed to the divorce. And um, I had a sort of a come to Jesus moment one day, actually, with my former father-in-law. And I went and sat down with him, and I was griping about his daughter, because that makes a lot of sense, right? Go
Yeah,
complain to your
yeah. There
former
you
father-in-law
go.
about his kid. Like, just shows you how stupid I can be. But I did for about 10 minutes. I'm just going, I don't understand why she's doing this, and I don't understand why she won't do things this way. And he just said, son, you got to stop. And I said, what? And he said, stop. If you couldn't get her to do what you wanted to when you were married, what on earth makes you think you can get her to do what you want her to do now?
Wow.
And I
Wow.
thought, well, that's not really fun to hear, but that's very powerful. And the other part that really hit me about that was, more importantly, it wasn't my job to get her to do what I wanted her to do. That was never even when we were married, that wasn't my job. And I didn't understand that. And so what it really helped me see is that in blended family life, just like you described, you have to control what you can control, do the best you can with things you can influence, and then
Mm-hmm.
let go of the rest, because otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy, or you'll do like I used to do a lot more of, not as much now, and you'll just have arguments in your head all the time with other people. You
Yeah.
know, you
Yeah.
just come up with these arguments. One thing will happen, and you'll spend 10 minutes just stewing over this argument you really want to have and getting your retorts right, you know, and it's like, no, that's not helpful to anybody. And so I teach these two pillars that have to do with mindset when I talk about blended families. They're very simple, and I believe they're very scriptural. Number one, be the adult you want your kids to become. So that means if you want your kids to be people of integrity, if you want them to be loving, and you want them to be gracious, and you want them to be honest, and you want them to go out of their way for other people, like the gospel talks about,
Mm-hmm.
you need to do that, and not just when it's easy. You need
Yeah.
to do that towards your ex. You need to do that towards the other household. You need to do that towards your ex's new partner, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do that, one, it's the right thing. Two, it sets a very powerful example for your children. And that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
all about. They learn a lot more by watching and listening, or sorry, they learn a lot more by watching than they do by listening, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And so that's the first pillar, is be the adult you want your kids to become. And the second one
Mm-hmm.
is remember the golden rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And in blended families, that's hard, because we don't want to do that. We want to treat people the way we feel like we were treated, or the way we feel like they deserve to be treated based on our hurt and our emotions.
Sure.
And that's not what the gospel calls us to. The gospel calls us to treat other people the way that we want to be treated. We need to, you know, love God, love your neighbor. Like that's the gospel in a
That's
nutshell,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And so your neighbor includes the people that hurt you the most. And that's the hard part of getting this approach right. That's the hard part of the attitude and the effort. Is it's not just about being good to your current spouse or to your kids. It is that, but it's bigger than that. You've also got to be good to the people that hurt you. You've got to be good to the people that shunned you, because that anybody who's been through a divorce knows people take sides. And
Yeah.
that's natural. Just like, again, when you were in junior high school and a couple broke up, you took sides. Are you friends with him? Or are you friends with her? And I wish I could say that adults are different. We're not. We're just older. We got more facial hair.
We
Some
still do.
of us are
We still
taller.
do
Some of us are not.
we still do the clicks in the hallways as
We
adults.
a little bit we
Now it's
do.
on social media.
Yeah, we're not supposed to, but we do. You know that, and I tell my students all the time. Like right now, I'm teaching junior high school, and I hadn't taught that in a decade. But you know, I'm 5'3.5" tall. You can't tell because I'm seated right now. But if I don't have a beard and I'm walking down the hallway and you see me walk into my classroom, like I could be a middle schooler. It's absurd. It's so
You're
very
undercover.
frustrating.
You're undercover. You're blending in.
Golly, I'm telling you what, it's annoying to have little 12-year-old kids walk in and look down at me as they go to their desk. But you know what? So be it. I can either treat
Great.
them the way that I want to treat them based on me and my Napoleon complex, or I can choose to try to be a good example to them and not let my own bitterness at being short take over in my class. And that's a goofy example, but That's how we are every day. Like, we need to
Yeah.
get this right. We've got to have the right attitude, and we've got to control our effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we
Now,
do those things, we're good.
I'll tell you right now, that's probably my biggest downfall and my biggest area for growth
Mm-hmm.
is loving the unlovable and
Absolutely.
trying to, I guess, portray that patience and grace that we're called to have. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the hardest thing to teach because I'm not overly gifted at that. So, I tell my kids, you got to do this. And then they see me in traffic and they're like, Dad, that negates everything you just said. So,
Hey.
we all
Yeah.
have room for growth, but at the same time, I think you hit the nail on the head because it is scriptural. It is bless those who curse you. It is love those who don't love you. Basically,
Yeah.
what good does it do to love the people that are easy to love? So
That's right.
and there's a song on the radio right now about love God and love people. And
Yeah.
my wife kind of elbows me every time that song comes on because I got half of that part right,
That's
and you get better
right.
at the other part. So no, I think that's good. Our approach, like you said, we control that. We choose it every day, and we really do. It's almost a multifaceted choice throughout the day. We
Yes.
have
Oh, yeah. It's the one that comes up over and over again.
opportunities for choices. Have you had to make any adjustments along the way within yourself? Aside from what you kind of said about just figuring out how to be
Mm-hmm.
gracious to those hard to be, what I call EGRs, extra grace required. Those people.
Nice. Dude, I need a sticker to put that on every day because I'm one of those people. You can ask
Yeah.
my wife. I'm an extra. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I like that.
I
EGR is
stole
good.
that. I stole that from one of our pastors years ago. He said, there are EGRs, and maybe I used to be one of them.
I know that I am. I'm telling you.
So yeah, tell me about adjustments that you made along the way for people that are listening that are like, man, I know what I need to get right. I just don't know how to get it right.
Yeah, so that's a great question because if you know what to do but you don't know how to do it, doesn't really do any good. I mean, I still coach soccer. I used to play baseball as well. But if you're up at the plate and you're swinging the bat and you're just striking out every time, and someone says, "Well, just hit the ball," well, thank you. That's
Exactly.
I know I need to do that. I'm obviously having an issue with the how do I do that, right?
Sure.
And so a couple of different things that I suggest. One is really, really strive to learn and act based on empathy. So, for example, nobody after they've gone through a divorce wants to ask how their ex is feeling. I don't care how they're feeling, right? But you should, especially if you have kids with them, because that's still the other parent of your kids. You need to ask how they're feeling, not necessarily ask them, but ask yourself, how are they feeling? And how they are feeling influencing how they're acting, because that will help you understand them a little bit better, and it will help you show that extra grace that's going to be required. If you can, we've all heard the expression walk a mile in their shoes. Well, I did. I went through the same divorce. Yes, but you went through it from a different perspective. It's not the same. What I went through and what my ex-wife went through were not the same experiences. It was the same divorce. They were not the same experiences.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what she's struggling with at her house. I don't know what she's struggling with when she has the kids. What I do know is life is complicated. And so if I can remember how complicated it is for me, if I can remember how hurt I am or was or whatever, then it helps me have better understanding for them. You mentioned earlier, it's really hard to love the unlovable. And it reminded me of a great quote from one of my all-time favorite books, which is Mere Christianity. I've read that book over a dozen times now. I used to teach it as a Bible class in the high school, and it was wonderful.
Oh, wow.
But he says, being a Christian means loving the unlovable because forgiving the unforgivable because God has forgiven you, right? We are the unforgivable. We are the unlovable, right? Jesus loves us not because we were lovable, but to make us lovable, right? And that's what we need to be remembering is that, or another great quote that I love comes from a guy named John Bradford in the 16th century. He's an Englishman. He's walking through the town one day, sees people being led to the gallows. And he says, there, but for the grace of God goes John Bradford, right? There, but for the grace of God go I. There's nothing between me and the person I judge hardest in the world except for God's grace.
Absolutely.
And the problem is until people have hit rock bottom, they may not understand that. They may still think, well, I'm better than them because I haven't fill in the blank, whatever it is you judge them for.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. Who knows what you would have done in their place? So one of the big adjustments I've made was to stop just acting on my own feelings and really try to understand where other people are coming from.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is to eliminate a lot of the negativity, eliminate a lot of the negativity. If the people you're spending time with are continuing to feed your bad attitude towards your ex,
there it is.
It's not actually helpful to you. It's not actually helpful to you.
That's awesome, man. And just go back to your point on C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, to reinforce the point of how powerful what he said is. He was an atheist who became a Christian. And, a lot of those historians out there, they know that you guys know this stuff, but that's just a picture of how powerful that mandate is, and what our call for other people is. And I think I'm getting more out of this maybe than some of the listeners, because it just magnifies the need that we have today, especially because of how divided we are, because of how just we're so unaccepting of each other and our failures. So perfect example. And those adjustments, I hope people are taking notes on that, because again, the point is nobody's got it all figured out.
Right.
This is a fluid document throughout our life, right? I mean, there are areas where we need that eraser. We need to maybe not write so many things in permanent marker and be willing to make those changes along the way.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great point. So that kind of leads us into some of the barriers that are out there. So the ABCs, and now we're on barriers. Man, we could talk for hours upon hours about what we put in our own way, kind of the things that we create those barriers. Talk about some, because what falls under this umbrella is, and we can speak from men's perspective here, but people in general, fears, insecurities, the pride sometimes that gets in the way, of course, when it comes to judging others and not loving those people that need it the most. I think pride's a huge thing there.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about maybe any one of those three that have impacted you, or, you can say all of the above, of course, like me. So yeah, talk to me about some of those barriers in your life.
Yeah, so definitely all three of the above. I mentioned already my Napoleon complex, which is, or you can call it short man syndrome. It's a very real thing.
Get it.
I have been ultra competitive my entire life. I was a college athlete. I played soccer for a couple years before I got married for the first time. And I grew up playing soccer and baseball because my dad had played college baseball. I picked up basketball in high school. I was okay at that. But I don't care if we're playing tic-tac-toe or if we're playing for a national championship. Like, I want to win. And that did not do me a lot of favors when my girls were little, because I don't know how you can be, but I was terrible at Candyland. Like, there's no skill involved in Candyland. You just draw the card. And you'd think that statistically, if I'm playing with my two daughters, I ought to win about 1 out of 3 games, right? There's 3 people. There's no skill, so I ought to win one. I lost 9 out of 10. I got to the point where I have not played Candyland since my kids got out of diapers. I refuse. And it's simply pride. I just can't stand losing, especially little kids can't read yet. Like, I don't need to be losing a game to them. It's ridiculous. But that's just pride. You know what I mean? That's just ego. And that only gets magnified when you talk about things that actually matter, right? So that's a goofy game of Candyland that I played with toddlers. What about when it is your marriage that just fell apart, or a job that you lost, right? What if it's a financial thing you were trying to go for and it fell through and now you're stuck holding the bag with a lot of debt? Like, those things really cause a lot of fear. They cause a lot of insecurity, and oh my goodness, do they dent your pride? And so for me, insecurity was a really big one, especially after my divorce, because I felt like, well, I mean, I've known this lady since I was 14, and then we started dating when we were in college, and then we got married, and I thought everything was a fairy tale.
Sure.
And if that didn't work out, how on earth could I find something that's going to be like that? And would I even want to try that again?
Yeah.
Because, man, that was awful. Like, the divorce process and just the pain of it. Oh, I can't believe how high the divorce rate is just because of how awful it is. Having been through it, I never want to do that again.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing, that really one of the other barriers that I've seen in my work, in addition to all the 3 that you mentioned, which are spot on: insecurity, pride, and fear. The other big one is pain. When you are acting out of pain all the time, you're not growing. You're just trying to manage the pain. And so you've got to find a way to start moving past it, right? I don't care if that's talking with a therapist, talking with a counselor, talking with a pastor, talking with a blended family coach, talking with a trusted friend, getting some medication to help you, reading yoga. I don't care. You have to find a way to stop acting from a place of pain. Until you do that, your life is limited by the pain. That doesn't mean it's ever going to fully go away. I mean, you talked about losing your dad to cancer. I did as well. My dad died. The type of cancer he had may or may not have been related to the Agent Orange in Vietnam. Government hasn't admitted that sort of thing yet, but
been there down that road before.
Exactly,
I got
right? Man, when I lost my dad, I'd never felt pain like that. And I'm not going to say it was better or less or more than the pain of divorce, but it was different.
Yeah.
But when I lost my dad, oh my goodness, that hurt. And until I could move past some of that hurt, like I just stopped doing certain things that I enjoyed. I loved playing baseball. I loved watching baseball, and I loved playing church league softball with my dad and turning double plays together as middle infield.
Sure. Wow.
Like, after Dad died, I didn't watch baseball for half a decade. Couldn't watch it. I just broke down in tears every time because of the pain, because I wasn't trying to work on it. You know what I mean? And when I finally did, I became very, it blew me away how much I had missed baseball.
Yeah.
You know, and I still love soccer too. Like, I watch soccer. My wife will tell you, I watch it every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But
wow.
I'm also really enjoying getting back into baseball, and I'm loving, while we're recording this, it's the World Series time. And the Dodgers are in the World Series, and that was my dad's team. I've got a signed Oral Hershiser's jersey in a big shadow box frame. I've got my dad's catcher's mitt and baseball glove that he used in college. And
nice.
And so those barriers are important. One, to identify what you're feeling insecure about. You've got to be willing to admit that. Until you admit the problem, you can't fix the problem.
Yeah.
The pride that everyone feels, that one shouldn't be hard to admit. Again, C.S. Lewis talks about that. He says, if you want to know how prideful you are, just ask yourself the question, how much do you dislike it when someone else takes the spotlight off you, whether it's at a party or whether it's at a dinner or whether it's just in your home. When someone else gets the glory, how do you feel? If you resent them for it, that's your pride.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the issue. And everybody has fears, especially like if you have kids, you're afraid of something happening to your kids. If you say that you're not, I 100% call you a liar. Everyone's scared of something happening to their kids. We all have insecurities. We all have issues of pride. We all have issues of fear. And I would also argue we all have issues of pain. And those are huge barriers that we've got to deal with. So I'm thankful to have been able to work through some of the pain and hurt from my divorce. I've worked through some of the insecurity. I don't know that it ever completely goes away. Just like losing a parent, you never fully get over that. It always is going to hurt. But it hurts differently as time goes by. The time changes. It becomes dulled. It becomes less sharp. It becomes maybe less overwhelming. It'll still crop up sometimes. And it happens at weird times. I'll be hanging out with my kids, and I'll see something while we're driving down the road, and it just start tearing up because it reminds me of something I did with my dad, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, mine's a song thing, like the radio.
Okay.
If you hear an old country song, I remember driving with him, going fishing and doing the things, and that brings that up. But I will say to you that pain is definitely one of them. But I've got 3 sons and a daughter, and my 3 sons play competitive baseball. 2 of them are in college playing baseball right now.
Nice.
And I've coached them, but I've always told them, guys, we're going to learn more from the pain of losing than you learn from succeeding.
Amen.
Like I believe that there's so many lessons within that struggle that people kind of get blinded by it, because you said, like, they don't want to acknowledge that because it brings back those painful memories, right? So people, it's like a hamster wheel. Like, you never hit that growth traction because you are afraid to go back there mentally because of that pain that it brings back.
That's right.
And so it's a vicious cycle. But I'm telling you, if we can get through that and just press through, there's something on the other side of that that's not only growth, it's freedom, it's peace, it's healing. So, I mean, you spoke great about that, because there's people out there right now that are like, look, I don't want to acknowledge those areas. Yeah. I mean, because it took me a year to get through them. You think I really want to go back and go through
Right. What about that sounds like fun? Thanks.
Yeah. So I think we're hitting on something. And usually when you hit a nerve like that, it's usually pretty real, and there's something very
there's a reason why that stings.
Necessary to get through that. Absolutely. You ever disqualified yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've spent most of my teaching career in small Christian schools. I've taught
Hmm.
public school, private school, Christian school, Muslim school, giant school, tiny school, but most of it's been in small private Christian schools. Well, people who teach at small private Christian schools aren't supposed to go through divorce. Like that's
Hmm.
kind of the understanding or the implication or
Yeah.
this, you know what I mean? Like, but I thought you had it all together. Otherwise, what are you doing here teaching us?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so after I went through my divorce, that's part of why I got out of teaching is I just thought, well, I guess I'm not qualified to do that because if I can't even keep my own life straight, because I definitely
Yeah.
made some big mistakes that contributed to our divorce. So if I don't even have my own life together, who am I to teach other people?
Hmm.
And that was huge. And the same thing when I started talking about leadership, I remember looking back and going, yeah, but my first marriage failed. And there are times when my kids just don't even want to spend time with me because I was extra harsh to them when they were younger because of my own anger issues. Like, who am I to tell these people those things? Who am I to go out and try to stand on a stage and say, hey, I've got some of the answers that might be able to help you? And it wasn't until God really hit me and said, but that's why I need you to go because because you've been through it,
You're
because you screwed
relatable.
up.
You're
Yeah.
relatable. Yeah.
And because there are other people that are going to be sitting in the audience who are disqualifying themselves by going, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z in my past.
Hmm.
And so I heard a great message about this. Actually, at the school I'm teaching at now, we have a thing called midweek. It's basically chapel. We do it on Wednesday mornings during the Bible class time period. And this week, we watched a video because we're doing them in our classrooms instead of everybody in the gym because of COVID
Yeah.
restrictions and stuff. We watched a video from a pastor at Church of the Highlands in Birmingham. His last name was Carter. I cannot remember his first name. It was something with an M, Carter, but he was wonderful. And the message was titled, Don't Box Me In. And it was, he was talking about, I think it was from Luke 5, but I may have that reference wrong. But it was when Jesus is speaking inside a house to a whole bunch of Pharisees and religious teachers, and these guys come and like lower a paraplegic through the roof.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's the story. And he's talking about don't box me in. And that's what these guys did. Like you see that house where Jesus is teaching as a box because the Pharisees saw him just as a healer at that point. But when this guy's lowered down, he says, hey, buddy, your sins are forgiven. And the Pharisees go, whoa, 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 whoa. No. Heal him, sure. Forgive sins? That's blasphemous. You can't do that. And Jesus says, I can do both. And just in case you weren't sure, hey, buddy, grab your mat and hit the road. Have a good afternoon, And all of a sudden the Pharisees are forced to acknowledge, wow, okay, so he's not just a healer. You can't box Jesus in that way. And as he was sharing this message, he also talked about the way that we box other people in. We box people in based on what they wear or what they drive or the home they live
Yeah.
in or the job they have or the friends they hang out with or their past.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said that hit me is, don't box me in based on my past mistakes. I am more than that one chapter of my life that you happen to have read. And God is
Yes.
writing another chapter right now.
Yes.
It was
Wow.
brilliant. I don't know. I'm sure you can probably find the video of it on
Wow.
YouTube or Church of the Highlands website or something, but I'm telling you, it's called Don't Box Me In. The guy's name is something with an M, Carter.
Okay.
And like you need to, it was great. But that's what I
Wow.
think about when I think about getting over self-disqualification. You know who was the least qualified person ever to share the gospel? Paul.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, good gracious. The guy persecuted the church. He stood by and cheered people on while they were stoning Stephen to death.
Yeah.
And God's like, yep, that's my dude.
I think about Peter too. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
what worse violation than to deny Christ
Yeah.
3 times? And
Yeah,
so
and not just one time, 3
yeah,
times after you've said, no, listen, Jesus, I got your back.
yeah. Look at
I
all
got
these
your back.
people who were disqualified on paper
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
do what they did, and look how they built the church. They wrote 2/3 of the Bible.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I mean my post today on Instagram talks about
I
not
saw it, the blank slate.
boxing yourself.
Yes, I
Yeah,
saw it. It was great.
the blank canvas, because a lot of folks, I mean, self included, my canvas looks pretty tarnished, looks
Yeah.
pretty torn
Definitely
from
parts of it I'm not happy
I've
about with my
done.
canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, every day can be a new one, and I think that's the thing is we got to stop dragging that anchor around,
Yeah. Well,
dragging those
yeah.
chains around
Yep.
from years ago or 5 minutes ago even. Because God, gives us a way to receive that grace and forgiveness. But man, what a great, no, you articulated that perfectly. We all do it. We all self-disqualify. I've
Yeah.
obviously just writing the book, that I wrote
Yeah.
recently, what do I know about leadership more than, there's a John Maxwell out there. There's a
Right.
John Gordon. There's these guys.
Yep.
And I'm like, what do I know? But I don't think that's what it is. I think God calls us to all have a voice. So that's
Yeah.
the beautiful thing. It's
Yeah.
not about, can I be a best-selling author? It's about maybe one thing I've experienced different, uniquely.
That's right.
And
That
the way
someone
that
else
I
needs to
approach
hear.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that'll resonate with one other person.
Amen.
Because that's how it sort of dominoes and spreads. So
Mm-hmm.
awesome, man. Listeners, ABCs, like approach, barriers. I think we all could write a few notes on each of those. The final one here is sort of the clutter that's
Mm-hmm.
out there. If you're driving down the road, and I use analogies of driving all the time because it's one of the most frustrating things where I live because it's growing so fast. So driving is one of my things.
Okay.
But no, so, diversions, detours, those kinds of things, obviously. We put a lot of barriers out there in front of ourselves. There are a lot that are out there anyway, regardless of whether we put them there or not. Some of the barriers or some of the clutter, clearing some of that debris requires us to make a choice on what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
What we hear, are we choosing to, that's a lie, we can acknowledge that, we dismiss it, or, hey, let's hear more life-giving truth about ourselves. Let's say it about ourselves. That's the thing when you talk about get out of your way. We tell ourselves a lot of things that could just create that clutter.
Yes.
Talk about some of the, practical ways that you clear some of that. You tell me your brand of debris that's out there, because everybody's got their own on what that obstacle is, but how are we clearing that out?
So, and I think you hinted at it. A lot of it is acknowledging that a lot of what we tell ourselves is just not true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great songs out there that talk about speak life. One of the things that I really enjoy seeing is on social media are a lot of Toby Mac's posts where the little thing at the bottom is speak life, because that's exactly what it is no matter what you've done, no matter what your past is, no matter what your mistakes are, God's grace is big enough to cover that. Mm-hmm. Jesus died for that specifically. Whatever it is you're torturing yourself over, whatever it is you're beating yourself up over, Jesus already died for that. That's already canceled out. He took it. He's done. Yeah. And the longer you hold on to it, the longer it's going to take you to figure out how to move past it. The other part of it is too, and I thought this was interesting. C.S. Lewis hints at this, maybe in Mere Christianity, maybe elsewhere in Problem of Pain or A Grief Observed, where he talks about the idea of when we refuse to forgive ourselves, we are putting ourselves in a place of judgment over what the work of Christ is. Because if we're saying, well, Jesus says he forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. Well, who are you? If Christ forgave you,
that's it.
What right do you have to not forgive yourself? You're putting yourself in a place higher than Jesus by doing that. And that's not who we are, right? Well, you don't know what I've done. I don't have to. I've done plenty of awful stuff. Trust me. Okay, I get it. Lots of people have done plenty of awful stuff. But Jesus died for those things specifically. He didn't die for everybody but you. He died for you. And he rose for you, and that's forgiven. And so when those little thoughts pop in your head, when the voices start going, people talk about this, like you lay down your head at night, and you're exhausted, and all of a sudden your eyes pop open, and the voice in your head goes, "You remember that awful thing you did 12 years ago, 18 years ago?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You remember that time in third grade when you were mean to somebody, and it's like,
you stole that pack of gum, you're not saved.
That's exactly right. And it's where you go, dude, be quiet. Like that's not the truth. And honestly, it becomes an exercise. Your brain is a muscle like anything else, and you can retrain it based on what you allow in. I heard I think it was either John Luther or Martin Calvin who had a great phrase where he said, you can't control the thoughts that pop into your head, but you can control which ones you focus on. And the illustration is you can't control if a bird flies over your head.
And that's the best. Yeah, that's the Bible.
Yeah, right? Like you can't – come on, man. And so just because a thought pops in your head doesn't make it true, doesn't mean it's from you, doesn't mean it's something you believe. So ask yourself, do I really believe that? And if not, just, okay, well, get out of the way. Like, let's move on. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I talk about with my 10 commandments for blended families. One of them is choose to believe the best about other people. And that's something that C.S. Lewis actually did write in Mere Christianity, where he says, a real desire to believe the best about others and make them as comfortable as possible will solve most of the problems. If you believe the other person always has ill intent toward you, you're always going to interpret things through that lens. So whatever they do, you're going to interpret in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
If you believe the best about them,
Yeah.
then you're going to interpret in the best part. Now, does that mean you're going to get burned and hurt sometimes? Yes. But guess what? That's going to happen no matter what. So then that could take us back to the first one, controlling your responses to stuff. Like, do you let that make you become bitter and cranky? Or do you say, well, I got burned again, so be it. I'm going to get burned one way or another, so I may as well still believe the best in people, right? And that's hard to do when you've been hurt. I get that. I'm not saying you should just instantly trust everybody, but you can consciously choose what you focus on and how you interpret those things. And this is something that I've learned mostly from my wife, actually. My superpower is the ability to unintentionally anger women of all ages. Could be a 2-year-old, could be a lady who's 87 years old, doesn't matter. If it's a female, I can make her mad without even trying. It's a gift and a curse, and mostly a curse. Because I have 2 daughters, I got a wife, I got an ex-wife, I got a soccer team full of girls that I coach. My older daughter plays club soccer, and she's U17, and I mean, I don't even have to try, and I can put girls in tears in about 30 seconds.
I got to tell you, to use the superpower, Wonder Twin powers activate, because you and I are alike in that. Like somehow I do that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's not a skill I've tried to acquire. In fact, I'm trying to get past it. But oh my goodness, there are days when I just come home and I go, honey, I did it again. And she's like, what did you do? And I'm like, well, I said this thing to this 7th grade kid. And she went, why would you say that? Well, I thought it was funny. Apparently she didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you goof off with junior high kids. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I did that with my wife even before we were married. We were dating one time, and I did something completely boneheaded, and it really hurt her feelings, and I didn't even know what I had done. Fortunately, she's one of those wonderful saintly women who never has said to me, if you don't know why I'm upset, I'm not going to tell you. Right? She's never said that to me, and praise the Lord, because I'm never going to figure it out.
Right.
And so what she does instead is she said, okay, honey, here's what happened. Here's why that hurt my feelings. And I went, oh, that when you explain it, that makes total sense. I was never going to get there by myself. It literally would never have occurred to me. And so now we have a phrase. When I'm saying something that could come across badly or could come across well, right? So how you choose to interpret it. Do you interpret that in a mean way or a nice way? I mean it nice. So that's what I say to her. I say, honey, I mean this nice.
Yeah.
I'll say whatever the phrase is. And she knows, okay, this is probably going to come out badly, but he means well.
Yeah.
I feel like every husband
statement. Yeah, we got to learn how to qualify, because I have a wife, of course, and my 12-year-old daughter. I think I can sometimes hug her, and it irritates her.
Oh, yeah. There's a great book called Hugging a Cactus, The Delicate Art of Hugging a Cactus.
Yeah. And it's all me. Yeah, it's all me. I do it wrong. But even my female dog, I think I irritate her.
Oh, yeah.
On it.
Yep.
Hey, so truth versus lies, I think that's huge on what we tell ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. I mean, really and truly, if we don't want to believe what we say, believe what God says about us.
That's
because, he does declare that we are more than conquerors. We can overcome these things. Talk to me about maybe some accountability as we close, through this clearing the debris of the clutter around and what we put in, the pollution that we hear, external stuff. Is it key to have somebody that you can kind of talk to, some of that accountability partner that can kind of, keep you honest, yet kind of be there for you to bounce things off of?
100%. You said, the key word is absolutely accountability. One of the things I wrote in my leadership book is no leader has ever accomplished anything worthwhile on their own.
Yeah.
Can't. You have to have a team around you. You've got to have people that you trust working with you. You cannot do anything great by yourself. Now, if you read history books, you might not realize that, because we attach one person's name to one person's bullet point for one accomplishment. But they didn't do that by themselves, right? There's no way that actually happened by themselves. And so accountability is absolutely crucial. Actually, the way that my wife and I first started hanging out was after my divorce. I just let myself go, and I put on about 45 pounds in 6 months. So I'm 5'3". I was just shy of 200 pounds. Well, that was uncomfortable. It was unhealthy. It was not good for anybody. And she was home for the summer from college, and she had actually she had dated a friend of mine a couple years earlier. They had broken up, and she and I had gotten in touch, and I said something about, I need to lose some weight. And she said, well, I'll come and work out with you. And so we went and got up at 5 in the morning, because the job I was working at to be there at 7:30. We'd work out at 5 in the morning till about 6 or 6:30, 5 days a week. I dropped 40, 45 pounds in like 3 months. I'm telling you, 100% of the time, I am not getting out of bed at 4:45 on a Tuesday before I've got to go work all day to go run 6 miles. I'm not doing that by myself. I will do that for another person who is also holding me accountable because they're doing the same thing or because they care about me. And we started dating about a year after that. But that was really how we started getting to know each other as adults, is being her holding me accountable to eating better and exercising and that kind of stuff. And that's absolutely, I don't care if you are training for a sport. I don't care if you're trying to lose weight. I don't care if you're trying to improve your marriage. We all need accountability, because the truth is we let ourselves slip into some negative habits. I'm still part of a couple different Facebook groups that talk about eating healthy and exercising for accountability, because if left to my own devices, I will gladly blimp back up to 180 pounds and then drop down to about 160 and then blimp back up and then drop back. And that's just not healthy. And so I need some accountability, and my wife does a lot of that for me as well. And she does it very lovingly, which I'm grateful for. But we all need accountability, especially in our spiritual life. And so, again, whether it's an elder from your church, a pastor, a youth pastor that you're friends with as adults or whatever, just a good buddy that you've known your whole life or that you trust or whatever it is, reach out to a professional. Doesn't matter. You need some accountability. And you, again, you said it very well when you said not just someone to ask you how you're doing, but someone to actually call you out when you're messing up. Someone that you trust enough that when they are honest with you, you will hear them, even if it's not pleasant. That's the hard part about accountability, is if you're going to let someone hold you accountable, they're going to say stuff you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. And you have to be humble enough to accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, the Bible talks about faithful, and I'm going to paraphrase, but faithful are the instruction of a friend, right? And beware of the kisses from the enemy, so you'll hear, if you're hearing those accountable in love, but truth from those people you trust, it's not always going to be what we want to hear. And that's okay. Right. That's okay, because growth happens through some of that discomfort. And that's what we're all trying to do, is get better at this. So, man, to close this out, I think this has been great. I think, your perspective on blended families absolutely translates into what we're talking about, getting out of our own way in certain things, vice versa. It all translates, it all blends together. Where can we kind of find some of your stuff, and when is the podcast going to be available?
Thank you for asking. You can find me online at joelwhawbaker.com. That's my speaker website. That's easy to find. Hawbaker's Hawbaker, just like it sounds. People get it wrong, but joelwhawbaker.com. You can also find me at reallifeleading.com, and you can find me at stepdadding.com. Those are all 3 different websites. And then you can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. It's all Joel W. Hawbaker. There just aren't many Joel Hawbakers out there, so it's probably me. But I would love to connect with people about that. The podcast launches on November 1st. There's a preview episode available now. On November 1st, the first 3 episodes will go live, and then I'll probably be I think the next one comes out on the 3rd of November, because it's the person I interviewed, it's her birthday, so that worked out real well. And then they're probably going to be coming out every week after that. And they're typically 30 to 45 minutes of discussion with blended family experts and leaders. And the idea there is to figure out how to do blended family life better. What I tell people is I want to help families learn how to live more cooperatively and positively together. Blended family life doesn't have to be awful. Doesn't have to be, it's always going to be complicated, but it doesn't have to be painful all the time. So I love doing that kind of stuff. Thank you for asking. And I would love to connect with your listeners and your viewers about any of these things. The other thing is my books are available on Amazon. But if anybody really wants them, just email me and I'll send you a free PDF of both of my leadership books, because I'm not interested in making a lot of money off of them. If you want the book, I want you to have it, and hopefully it will help you learn and grow and be inspired, that kind of thing. That's
great. That's awesome. Because, I'll be honest. So when I came up with Last in Line Leadership, and God kind of gave me this project in this direction, the narrative behind that has always been, equipping, encouraging, and empowering people, right,
Mm-hmm.
to be better leaders in their home, workplace, community by applying some of these faith-based principles,
Right.
and really getting around like-minded people too, I think is key. And you hit on that with accountability. So, Joel, I really can't tell you how happy, honored, and actually blessed by this, because I took away some nuggets. I hope the listeners did too. Everybody out there, look, I hope you wrote down a lot of things. Send this out, spread the word. There's some nuggets on there that people need to hear that Joel had to say. But I think it's been good. And I just want to encourage you guys, like, dig in, lean in to some of those uncomfortable situations, either from your past or what you're going through now. Lean into them, because on the other side is freedom. On the other side is the leader you were called to be, and God's purpose for you. So till next time, be blessed.